Define additive materials. In this video, we'll define study materials and we'll solve a generative design study. In Fusion 360, we want to carry on with our additive bracket design. At this point, we want to focus on adding our materials, and then we want to solve our generative study. First, we want to note that our focus for this example is additive, so we want to go to our additive materials library. We're going to take a look at some metal materials, but we're also going to focus on plastic. So first, you'll notice that the aluminum is already added as a default material. We also want to add a stainless steel material. So when we look through stainless steel, we have two options. There's a 17-4 and an AISI 304. We're going to add the 304 to our list, and then we're going to move on to our plastic materials. There are only three that are listed in here, one for the HP Jet Fusion machine, and then we have Orgasol and Rilson. So we're going to go ahead and add all three of those materials, noting that there is a maximum limit that we can have for the number of materials in the study. We haven't hit that number yet, and in general, it's going to be about 7 materials. So keep in mind that just adding a load of different materials to see the results is not going to be helpful, and you do want to be mindful of the materials, making sure that they are close to or exactly what you have access to. Now that we do have our materials, I'm going to hide my obstacle geometry and take a quick look at the previewer to make sure that I do have an appropriate build volume. These two preserved geometry pieces are in direct line of sight with no obstacles between them, so it should be no issue to begin building. You can see here that it has no trouble first creating a boundary that goes directly between the two. So now that I know that's the case, I can go ahead and move on to generating some outcomes. Keep in mind that solving a generative design study will cost 33 cloud credits. If you need more information about your cloud credit account and the use of cloud credits, you want to make sure that you do go to learn more to understand about how they're used and how you can purchase them. There is additional options for viewing where you can show the cloud credit cost and balances. So keep in mind that you can change these options to show your balance, and you can make the decision whether or not you want to solve. For this course, we are going to be going through the outcomes. So if you want to follow along with the Explore section of this, then you will need to solve the study. But when we review the 3D model that's created, I will provide those data sets. So if you don't want to use 33 cloud credits to solve the study, you can follow along in the next video, and then you can use the supplied data sets to review those 3D models. When we generate the study, it is important to understand that this is offloaded to a server. It's not solved locally. And this means that you can continue creating generative design studies or keep working in Fusion 360. It's going to send that data to the server, and as that data gets sent, it's going to begin solving for those outcomes. One of the great benefits of this method is that we can see this happening in real time. The outcomes and the thumbnails of those outcomes will appear as they're generated. So we don't need to watch the job status as it's processing, but you can check back from time to time and you can explore these outcomes as they're being created. If you go back to the generative design and take a look in the browser, you can see next to our study that we see that the generate is in progress. This will turn into a green check mark once the solve is complete. You can also go back to your job status dialog and take a look at the generative design solving process. And again, at any time, we can go back and explore the results as they're being created. You generally won't see much for at least about 10 or 15 minutes. It's simply going to start creating those volumes that we saw in the previewer and begin solving. This process can take anywhere from roughly 30 minutes to several hours to complete. So keep that in mind as you continue to progress through this course, that the solve will take a bit of time for you to get to that explore on your own. But keep in mind that you can follow along with the next video and follow along with the Explore process and use the data sets that are provided. From here, if any additional changes were made, make sure that you do save the design, but keep in mind that any changes to manufacturing methods, load cases, or objectives, or even the preserver obstacle geometry after a solve has been started can cause problems downstream. You always want to make sure that we do create a clone or a copy of this generative model, and that's something we'll cover later on in the course. From here, we can check back in once the solve has begun producing some outcomes.